here we go with the end of the Harry Potter cash cow. No more books means no more movies. Unless of course Warner Brothers are planning on strapping J.K. Rowling to a chair and in front of a typewriter. Harry Potter the college years, anyone? So anyway, the decision was made to take the last book in the series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, and split it into 2 movies. Now, this is probably just me being cynical, but that seems like an excuse to keep the franchise going for an extra year longer than expected.
We've got to have money.
Now, even though I've now seen both Part 1 and Part 2, I can now understand why the film was split into 2 parts. I still think they should have just gone ahead and made this whole thing into a 3-hour plus movie anyway. By this point in the series, the films aren't for little kids anymore. Things have gotten a lot darker since the wide-eyed innocence of the first couple of movies. There's no chocolate frogs and afternoon games of Quidditch anymore. Only death, destruction, dragons, and a sense of impending doom. Just like a real school then. Even though I can see why the film was split into 2 parts, the first movie just goes as slow as hell. It's basically been described as the one with the tent. And then that's what Harry and his friends are doing most of the time. They have to go into hiding in order to find and destroy the Horcruxes that contain part of Voldemort's soul. Once all the Horcruxes are destroyed, then Voldemort can be killed once and for all. The problem is that no one knows what the Horcruxes look like, where they can be found, or even how to destroy them. Vold himself is all-powerful now, as he and his dark wizards have now taken over the Ministry of Magic and plan to get rid of all the wizards that are half-blood, as he considers them to be impure. This is clearly a metaphor for when the Nazis took over Germany and tried to get rid of what they considered to be an inferior race. So I guess that means that Voldemort is the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. I wonder if he only has one bollock as well. Maybe he doesn't have any bollocks at all. It would certainly explain why he's so pissed off most of the time. So the pace of the film is quite a slow one. It starts off well enough with a couple of action scenes at the Weasley house and in the middle of London, and we get some truly tense and scary moments when the Potter gang disguise themselves and infiltrate the Ministry of Magic itself in order to find one of the Horcruxes. But after that, the film slows down to a crawl, and it has a bit of a job trying to get back up to speed again. It doesn't help that Ron is a bit of a dick in this movie as well.
You think I don't know how this feels?
Oh, you don't know how it feels! Your parents are dead! You have no family!
Stop! Stop!
Having said that, it was still better than Percy Jackson, or any of that Twilight crap, or Twishite, as I tend to call it. One of my favourite parts of the film was, weirdly enough, an animated segment showing the origins of the Deathly Hallows themselves. And if you don't feel just a little bit choked up when Dobby the house elf dies in Harry's arms, then I suggest you check your pulse, as you very well might be dead. Part 2 plunges straight in from the events of Part 1. You could literally watch the 2 films back to back, and straight into a series of action-packed moments involving chase scenes and dragons. Although I have to say that the pacing was still off. While some moments of Part 1 dragged along, some moments of Part 2 just seemed rushed. For Deathly Hallows Part 2, Alan Rickman really sells the complexity of the character of Professor Severus Snape. Throughout the series he seems like a typical, nasty, sneering bad guy. But he was always the red herring. Even when he took Dumbledore's life in The Half-Blood Prince, he did it not because he was a bad guy, and not because he was one of Voldemort's followers, but because Dumbledore himself asked him to do it in order to stop Draco Malfoy from going down that same path to darkness. In this movie, we realise the sacrifices that Snape had to make and the bravery that he had to show, and I thought that Alan Rickman captured that perfectly.
Has any knowledge of Mr. Potter's movements this evening? I invite them to step forward. Now.
But of course, we've had a selection box of British acting talent throughout the entire series. I have also thoroughly enjoyed Ralph Fiennes' portrayal of Voldemort, and this time he brings a certain vulnerability to the Dark Lord in Part 2. Because now he realises that this time, for the first time since his resurrection, that there is a very good chance that Harry Potter will be able to stop him. Rupert Grint and Emma Watson have remained great actors throughout this entire series and have improved and evolved their characters through each movie. I actually cheered out loud when Ron and Hermione finally had their first kiss. About bloody time! I also cheered when Neville Longbottom fulfilled his own destiny and became the hero by pulling the sword of Gryffindor out of the sorting hat. Just goes to show you can have all the resurrection stones, elder wands and invisibility cloaks in the world, but really all you need is a cardigan. Daniel Radcliffe started out about as wooden as his broomstick when this series first started, but he's made huge improvements since then. Don't believe me? Go back and check out the earlier films. There's a big difference now in the way that he delivers his lines. You've got to respect the fact that when he isn't being Harry Potter, then he's acting on Broadway, honing and developing his acting abilities, and he should be applauded for that, even if he does get his knob out. Director David Yates has done a great job with the Potter films that he's been given to helm. You often wonder how the entire series would have looked if he had directed all of the films from the beginning. Because one thing that the Potter movies suffer from is that there's always a very sudden change of the look of the film whenever a new director takes over. David Yates deserves a lot of credit for taking this beast by the horns and steering it onto a path of consistency. This restores my faith in big budget Hollywood blockbusters in which it is possible to still have great storytelling and great acting and monster swathe of CGI special effects. And of course we get lots of that because at the end there is a huge Lord of the Rings type smackdown involving trolls, giant ass spiders, spells flying left, right and centre and people dropping like flies. But it's the final showdown between Potter and Voldy that ensures that this movie, and indeed this entire series, ends on a truly epic scale. Also memorable at the end is a very satisfactory final scene set 19 years later, where Harry and Ginny and Ron and Hermione are sending their own children to Hogwarts, letting us all know that they all did truly live happily ever after. So long, Harry. We'll certainly miss you. I'll always have a special place in my heart for you and the Wizarding World, apart from Daniel Radcliffe's chest hair. The Big Daddy D gives Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2, not to mention the entire Harry Potter movie series, a resounding thumbs up.